If you do anything wrong in your life, and I find out about it, I'm gonna try to take everything away from you. And I don't care when I find out.
If you ever mess up in your life and I catch wind of it, just know I'm coming for everything. I won't care what it is. I'll try to take it all. When Will Smith stepped onto that Oscar stage and slapped Chris Rock, most people figured it would fade out in a week. A viral moment, a meme storm. Another Hollywood scandal quietly swept under the red carpet like so many before it. But nearly 3 years later, the opposite happened. It didn't fade, it detonated. And two of the boldest comics alive, Katt Williams and Dave Chappelle, made sure nobody would ever forget it. This is the story of how one open-handed slap lit a fuse that took years to explode, and how the comedians Hollywood once tried to sideline ended up holding the flame. Stay locked in, because by the end of this, you might never see Will, Hollywood, or the comedy world the same way again. The slap that cracked the foundation. Before we get to Katt and Dave, we have to rewind. Not just to the slap, but to what it exposed. On March 27, 2022, at the Dolby Theater in Hollywood, Will Smith crossed that stage and struck Chris Rock in front of millions watching live. Rock, doing what comedians do, had made a quick G.I. Jane joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head, a 5-second reference tied to a medical condition she had openly discussed. The crowd barely reacted. Will even laughed at first, then something shifted. What followed broke every unspoken Hollywood rule. Every celebrity code, every basic line of public behavior. Will stood up, walked on stage, and hit a man who was simply holding a microphone. The smack echoed through the theater. Chris stumbled, stunned, unsure whether it was a bit or a real assault. It was real. And here's the part that still feels unreal. Nothing happened. Security didn't rush in. The Academy didn't escort him out. No removal, no immediate consequence. Instead, 40 minutes later, Will Smith stood at that same podium, accepted the Oscar for Best Actor, and received a standing ovation from the very industry that had just watched him attack one of its own. He cried, spoke about love, God, Richard Williams, destiny, and the room applauded. They let that sink in, because that standing ovation, not the slap, is what turned a bad night into a cultural earthquake. Why comedy refused to stay quiet, comedians saw it instantly. Chris Rock hadn't crossed some unforgivable line. He told a joke, and he was physically punished for it on live television. While Hollywood rewarded the attacker, the comedy world circled up. Jim Carrey went on CBS Mornings and called the standing ovation one of the most spineless moments he'd ever witnessed in the industry. He made it clear, you don't get to walk on stage and hit someone because they said words. Bill Maher added that alopecia isn't a terminal illness and that joking about someone's appearance, especially when it's already public, doesn't justify violence.
How are you?
Across the board, comics drew the same boundary. Words are not violence. Offense is not assault, but two men went further than anyone else. Dave Chappelle first, and later Katt Williams. Dave Chappelle, the first shockwave 5 weeks after the Oscars. Dave Chappelle was performing at the Hollywood Bowl during Netflix's comedy festival when chaos erupted. A 23-year-old man, Isaiah Lee, rushed the stage with a replica gun that had a folding knife blade attached and tackled Chappelle in front of thousands. It was sudden, violent, unthinkable. Security swarmed. Audience members like Jamie Foxx and Busta Rhymes helped subdue the attacker. Chappelle was shaken but not seriously injured. Now pause. March 27, Will Smith slaps Chris Rock. 40 minutes later, standing ovation. 5 weeks later, a man tackles Dave Chappelle on stage with a weapon. Comedy club owner Danny Zoldan from Stand Up New York said what many were thinking. Before the Will Smith incident, there was an invisible fence around comedians. People didn't cross it. After the slap, that barrier felt weaker, like violence against performers had suddenly become thinkable. The copycat effect wasn't theory anymore, it had already played out. But Chappelle's reaction made it even bigger. 2 days after being attacked, he did a surprise show at the Comedy Store in Los Angeles. Chris Rock joined him, two comedians, both assaulted within a month, and they did what comics do best. They turned it into material. Chappelle joked that at least Chris got smacked by someone famous. He'd been tackled by a guy with leaves in his hair. Chris fired back. Chappelle got attacked by the softest person that ever rapped. The room exploded, but that line wasn't just funny, it was precise. Chris wasn't calling Will dangerous, he was calling him soft, performative, a tough guy moment that exposed the fragility beneath a carefully polished image. The Fresh Prince, the blockbuster hero, the wholesome family man. In one burst of anger, that image cracked, not because he was too strong, but because he looked hollow. Chappelle's deeper diagnosis and Dave didn't stop at punchlines. During the joint tour he and Rock launched in September 2022, starting at Liverpool's M&S Bank Arena, Chappelle went further. His breakdown of Will Smith wasn't loud, it was almost clinical. He suggested that what the world saw that night wasn't strength, it was something far more complicated. And that's where the conversation about Hollywood, celebrity power, and carefully managed public personas really begins. A lot of people forget who Will Smith really is. 10 minutes before accepting the biggest award of his life, he reacted like he was still that kid from West Philadelphia. Dave Chappelle wasn't talking about glamour, he was pointing at something deeper. Fame doesn't rewrite your core, it just puts better lighting on it. Then he dropped this: Will played the role of the perfect man for 30 years, and in one moment he tore the mask off and showed he's flawed like the rest of us. Read that again. Chappelle wasn't simply dragging him, he was doing something more layered. He humanized Will while still holding him accountable. People are here screaming your name, that makes you feel good. He was saying the real Will was always there, the anger, the unresolved wounds, the cracks beneath the polish. Hollywood let him hide it because the charming movie star was profitable. Oscar night wasn't an accident, it was exposure. Then Chappelle said something that made the room go quiet. He hoped Will wouldn't put the mask back on. He hoped he'd let the real version breathe. So ask yourself, is that compassion or condemnation? It's both. Chappelle was basically saying in front of thousands that the empire you built was performance art, and now we've seen behind the curtain. When Chappelle released his Netflix special The Dreamer on New Year's Eve 2023, he revisited it again. He revealed he waited 30 or 40 minutes after the Oscars, long enough for Chris Rock to get to another party, then FaceTimed him. Chris answered. Out of everyone blowing up his phone, Rock picked up for one person, another comedian. Someone who understood what it meant to be attacked on stage without turning him into a spectacle. Katt Williams enters, and he brought receipts if Chappelle was a scalpel. Katt Williams came in with a flamethrower. For years, Katt operated outside the Hollywood machine in ways Will never did. Will was box office royalty, Academy approved, safe. Katt built his brand as the outsider, burning bridges, saying what others wouldn't, getting dragged by tabloids before finally having the last laugh. On Shannon Sharp's Club Shishay podcast, Katt didn't just mention Will. He peeled back the entire Hollywood celebrity myth. Names were named, context was given, accusations were specific, and he delivered it calmly. Like someone who'd been waiting years for the moment. What made it sting wasn't just that he criticized Will, it was the bigger picture. Katt described a system, a power structure that protects some, silences others, and decides in advance who gets to shine and what they must trade to stay there. In his telling, Will wasn't crushed by that system. At times, he thrived inside it. The interview went viral for a reason. Katt said the quiet parts out loud, the things people whispered but couldn't get anyone famous enough to confirm. He connected the carefully curated image Will protected for decades to the eruption on that Oscar stage, the very mask Chappelle talked about. Katt explained how the mask gets made, who benefits from it, and what it costs. So here's the real question. When two of the boldest voices in comedy, one surgical, one explosive, are saying this about you, what does that say about the story you spent 30 years selling? Chris Rock. The full reckoning by the time Chris Rock stepped onto the stage at Baltimore's Hippodrome Theater on March 4th, 2023 for his Netflix Live special Selective Outrage. The world had waited almost a year to hear him speak. For 50 minutes, he didn't even mention Will. He hit woke culture, the Kardashians, Meghan Markle, alopecia, almost teasing the crowd. Then with 10 minutes left, he pivoted. The slap still hurts, he said. He still hears the summertime ringing in his ears, turning Will's biggest hit into a joke about lingering pain. He calmly laid out the physical reality. Will played Muhammad Ali in a biopic. Chris played Pookie in New Jack City and even voiced a piece of corn in an animated film. The self-deprecation wasn't pity, it was precision. This wasn't an even matchup. Then came the core of it. He had nothing to do with Will and Jada Pinkett Smith's issues. No entanglements, a clear nod to that infamous Red Table Talk episode where Jada discussed her relationship with August Alsina, a confession that turned the word entanglement into cultural shorthand for public marital humiliation. Chris argued that Jada hurt Will more than he ever did. The internet dragged Will for a year. So who did he hit? Not August, not the trolls, he hit Chris. A smaller man, a man he knew wouldn't swing back. On a global stage where he could perform as the defender of his wife, Chris called it weak. And honestly, he had a point. The portrait he painted was sharp. This wasn't about a joke being too harsh, it wasn't about heroic protection. It was about performing strength he didn't feel. He couldn't fight the internet, he couldn't fight the narrative. So he chose the safest possible target at the biggest possible moment. It wasn't chivalry, it was theater, and Chris dissected it frame by frame. The fence is gone, this part matters. What happened that night didn't just impact one comedian, it rattled the entire profession. Stand-up isn't casual. It's vulnerability under bright lights, it's risk. It's saying something that might bomb or offend and trusting the audience won't cross a line. There's always been an unspoken rule. You can dislike the joke, but you don't touch the comic. That's the fence. And on Oscar night, that fence got knocked down.
Yeah, you can't buy chemistry and you can't fake it. You either vibe somebody.
He didn't swing in a back alley. He didn't handle it privately. He did it on the biggest stage imaginable. And 40 minutes later, the very industry that should have been stunned gave him a standing ovation and the highest honor in film. So what does that signal? What does it teach every unstable, aggrieved viewer sitting at home replaying some old insult from a mic that made them feel small? 5 weeks later, Dave Chappelle was tackled on stage by a man carrying a weapon. That's the message. Howie Mandel said it plainly. The slap opened the floodgates. Violence inspires more violence. Venues nationwide had to rethink security like never before. Barriers between comics and crowds, tighter screenings, the kind of measures that changed the intimacy of live comedy. And why? Because one man couldn't process his pain without turning someone else's face into a target. The career that was already slipping, here's what gets buried in the moral debate. Before the slap, Will Smith's box office dominance was already cooling. The era of the guaranteed blockbuster, the star who could sell a movie on name alone, had been quietly fading. Big swings didn't always connect. The effortless charm that once made him untouchable wasn't landing the same way in a franchise-driven, streaming-heavy industry. He wasn't failing. But he wasn't automatic anymore. King Richard was supposed to reset everything. A prestige biopic about a black family's triumph, the kind of role that reminds everyone there's serious talent beneath the action hero persona. And it worked. He got the nomination, the momentum, the near certain win. Then he slapped Chris Rock, accepted the Oscar, gave a tearful speech about love, and the public lens shifted permanently. The Academy banned him for 10 years. His name quietly fell off multiple projects. Emancipation, the slavery drama filmed before the incident, arrived under a cloud. As Chris Rock later joked in his special audiences, watching it felt like they were rooting for the wrong side. A film meant to showcase depth and humanity became unfairly but undeniably tangled in irony. He hasn't had a major theatrical hit since. Katt Williams and the bigger system. What Katt Williams grasped and why his commentary hit so hard is that this wasn't just one man's meltdown. It was a snapshot of how Hollywood manufactures and discards people. American celebrity runs on compliance. You build a persona, what Chappelle called a mask. That's smoother, safer, more profitable than the human being underneath. You manage PR, control optics, curate vulnerability, perform relatability. It's all performance. For 3 decades, Will Smith mastered that machine, the Fresh Prince. The action hero, the family man who was cool but never threatening, the rapper turned actor who appealed to teens and grandparents alike. He was the system's gold standard until he wasn't. Katt had been hinting for years in interviews the mainstream shrugged off and stand-up that made people uncomfortable. That the machine itself is flawed, that the bargains made at that level of fame aren't always discussed, that the mask costs something, and that nobody climbs that high without surrendering something they can't reclaim. He wasn't only talking about Will, but Will's public unraveling made those warnings impossible to ignore. What this means for comedy, the image of Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle sharing a stage, refusing to shrink, mattered. 2 of the most influential black comedians alive, both attacked within weeks, and neither responded with lawsuits, PR campaigns, or public breakdowns. They responded with sharper comedy. Chris turned his pain into the most watched special of the year. Chappelle turned his into layered reflections that complicated the easy headlines.
And I would never play an arena before I saw you do it. You made me dream bigger, and you're younger than me.
Together, they made a statement. Comedians will not be bullied into silence. If anything, the violence sharpened them. and Katt Williams, circling from the outside, added the bigger picture, the industry critique neither Rock nor Chappelle were positioned to fully unpack. The three voices together created something powerful, a portrait Hollywood would have preferred stayed buried, Will Smith's silence, and what it says after Chris Rock's Netflix special. Sources close to Will Smith claimed he didn't watch it himself. He had others summarize it. He was embarrassed and hurt. He felt Chris crossed the line by bringing Jada back into it. He wanted Chris to move on. Back in July 2022, he posted a YouTube apology video. Chris publicly dismissed it as a hostage tape, staged remorse, careful image rehab, not authentic accountability. Then Will largely went quiet. There's something telling about that. Real accountability usually means engagement, addressing the substance, responding to the psychological portrait painted by Rock, Chappelle, and Williams, not defensively but demonstrably. Instead, he waited for the cycle to fade. But comedy doesn't let things fade when they're still raw. It keeps pressing until the truth surfaces. Right now, three comedians, one slapped, one attacked in the aftermath, one who's long criticized the machine, have made sure that moment of displaced rage remains attached to Will Smith's story in a way no PR strategy can erase. The legacy question, so here's the question that actually matters. What is Will Smith's legacy now? Not the Fresh Prince, not Independence Day, not Ali, not King Richard, not the red carpets or the decades-long American dream narrative. In 2024 and beyond, when his name comes up in clubs, interviews, or casual conversations, what comes first? The slap, the walk across that stage, the sound of an open hand echoing through the Oscars, the standing ovation, the speech delivered minutes later, the mask Chappelle described, the displaced anger Chris Rock dissected, the structural critique Katt Williams tied to a bigger Hollywood indictment. That's the association, and here's the harsh irony. Will Smith spent 30 years engineering an image designed to outlive controversy. He understood branding before Hollywood turned it into a science. He'd built a persona meant to withstand any storm, and in seconds it cracked. Not because of a joke, not because of an entanglement, not because of alopecia or boycotts or old grievances, but because when the pressure peaked and the pain hit deepest, Will Smith chose violence and then stood at a podium and accepted applause for it.
Humbled by the reaction to this film.
And three comedians, the one he slapped, the one attacked in the aftermath, and the one who'd been sounding alarms for years, refused to let that moment be the final chapter, the night that shifted everything. Let's be real about this. Will Smith's career isn't technically finished. He still has wealth, he still has powerful industry relationships, he still has fans who want to hold on to the Fresh Prince they grew up with. And Hollywood, it has revived reputations far messier than this, but something ended. The version of Will who could walk into a room and instantly radiate warmth, the version whose movies you watched without that background noise in your head, that version feels different now. Dave Chappelle said it best, the mask slipped, and once you've seen behind it, you can't rewind. Katt Williams reinforced that by tying the incident to something bigger than one chaotic night. Chris Rock locked it in by dedicating the most carefully constructed 10 minutes of his career to breaking down exactly what happened and why it mattered. And Chappelle, he elevated it beyond gossip. He turned it into a larger reflection on authenticity, celebrity masculinity, and what it cost to perform perfection for 3 decades straight. One night didn't erase Will Smith's resume, but one night became the filter through which every year before and every year after gets judged. In Hollywood, that kind of shift can be just as permanent as a full stop. Final thoughts now, we want to hear from you. This story isn't black and white, and your take matters. Can Will Smith truly recover from this? Not just professionally, but emotionally, culturally, and the way audiences feel about him. Is there a real path back to public trust, or has the mask been off too long? And what about comedy? Are comedians stepping on stage today with more caution than they were 3 years ago? Was that invisible fence permanently knocked down? Or did the pushback from Rock, Chappelle, and Williams help rebuild it? And maybe the biggest question of all, has Will genuinely evolved? Or is he quietly preparing to put the mask back on? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This conversation isn't ending anytime soon. If this video made you think, hit like, share it with someone who's been following this saga, and subscribe. We're only getting started.